The Nasdaq 100 made a breakthrough on Monday as price breached the trend line that we spoke about in the last video. This trend line held firm for all of last week, but price saw this trend break to the upside, which sits around 14,665 to 700. This was driven by expectations that the Fed would not move on rates this week and that inflation would cool off to justify this. Tuesday was the release of US inflation, and the numbers came out as expected, with US CPI cooling off again in May to 4% year on year, below estimates of 4.1%. That gave risk assets a lift as it backs up the expectation that the Fed will skip any interest rate hike this week. You can see from this chart energy was the biggest factor in inflation falling, with US inflation at its lowest in 2 years. Price did come back to test the trendline break on Tuesday. Wednesday it was the same pattern, another retest of the trendline break. This was triggered by initial knee-jerk reaction to the Fed meeting. Whilst the Fed left rates unchanged, it did signal another 2 rate hikes, which triggered the initial sell-off. However, price rebounded off this key trendline, which price broke above on Monday. You can see from this chart the Nasdaq 100 versus the 2-year yield. The 2-year yield initially spiked, but then came off and is back to the levels prior to the Fed meeting. This suggests the market has shrugged off the forecast of the further 2 rate hikes by the Fed, which is why the Nasdaq 100 has continued to rally into Thursday. This was despite the ECB raising rates, with the central bank diverging from the Fed, stating they're not planning on pausing rate hikes. If we go back to the weekly chart, we can see price has breached this weekly trend, which connects to the highs from November and December 2021. 15,100 is the level quoted in the last video, which is where the trend line connects. However, we're currently trading above it. In terms of level to watch into the close of next week, this trend line around 15,100 to 160 is key. If you look at the other indicators, like the MACD and the stochastic, we're in overstretched territory. Be wary of a false break to the upside here, as today is options expiry, which usually results in heightened volatility. A pullback is imminent and likely next week. With the Nasdaq 100 up 33% year to date, a pullback after the strong run from 12,940 at the beginning of May would be healthy. Support levels to watch are 14,840, being the trend line price broke above this week, and then 14,530 to 550, which is where the 20-day moving average sits. Next week is relatively quieter calendar week, with another major central bank, the Bank of England, set to decide rates on Thursday. With that said, thanks for watching. Remember to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future content. And I'll see you at the next one.